So what is the problem? The problem is I want to do deforms of my character and see if they look good from many angles, right? Let's say these 4 angles here. And so what I can do is cycle through poses, and as long as she's standing here on the origin of the world, it's rather easy to have 4 views, one in front, one behind, and 2 on either side, that point at her body, and you can kind of get a sense of where what they look like. But when I move her far from the origin, here she's not even moved very far from the origin, but already this view here, you can't actually see most of her body, and this one here, she's quite a distance away. These two, you notice, actually look fine. But also if she's sitting down, for example, then she gets put in the very bottom of the frame, and she doesn't fill the frame much up over here. But notice in these 2 views she does. And what's happening here is these 2 views have a special camera set up that I've already done, and these 2 have not. And so as you can see, most of the time they work out the same, because most of the time she's standing on the origin, but when she's not, or when she's compressed or something like that, it all gets a little bit strange. So I'm going to show you how I set up the cameras for these 2 views in case you want to do something similar. So what I've done here is I've already got the forward camera set up here, and that's this camera right here. That's the forward camera. And let's take this. These are the 2 cameras, back and front. And so this front camera is a child already of the rig, or one of the bones in the rig. And that way, if I take the rig and move it around, you can see this camera here and this camera here. That's the back, and this is the front. They move as well. And so in the bottom view down there, you can see it looks like she isn't moving at all, because the camera is moving along, but the world moves around her. And so that's what's going on there. So also, if she, say, stands up, the camera here, you can see, watch this camera right here, when I switch between the 2 poses, you see how it moves up and down. On top of that, the length of this camera shows the focal length, and as you can see when I switch between them, here the focal length is a bit shorter, here the focal length is a bit longer, and that's so that she will be fully in frame in both of those cases. She zoomed in here, she zoomed out a bit here. So let's see how that's done. There's 2 parts to it. The first part, well, I guess there's 3 parts. The first part is that it's a child of the rig. Okay, that's fine. The next part is there's a constraint, limit location constraint. And what I've done is set a limit location minimum and maximum of both X and Z to 4 different drivers, or actually 2 different drivers, but 4 times. So let's look at the first, that X driver. So what I've done is I've gotten the X location of her left foot, left hand, right hand, head, and center of gravity. And what this basically means is I've picked the things that will move around in the extremities the most. Like maybe if she's touching her toes, then her hips will be at the top, and her hands and feet will be at the bottom, and her head about halfway in between. But if she's standing on her tippy toes and stretching her arms way up over her head, then her hands will be way up at the top, her feet way down at the bottom, etc. There are different times that head, hips, and hands and feet will be in different locations. So what I do is I pick the X location of all of those 6 controls, and then I just say, okay, well, what's the minimum of those 6 controls? Add in the maximum and divide by 2. And so if you recognize that, that's just averaging, right? So I'm taking the leftmost object and the rightmost object and dividing by 2 and saying, okay, that's where the camera is going to be, exactly halfway between those 2 things. For the maximum X, it's the exact same driver, nothing different at all. And then for the Z, it's slightly different. It's the same 6 controls, but I get the Z location, of course. And then I do the same thing. I'm taking min and max and dividing by 2. Now I am adding a little bit of a value here, and the reason for that is because there's this head control here, as you can see, is not above her head. It's actually down in her hair, and I like to see her hair inside the frame. So that plus 0.1 there is just to make it look a little better for me. It's not technically required. It's only required for this character because she has huge hair. And so I do the same thing with the Z location, minimum and maximum. It's the exact same formula, exact same driver in both cases. And the third thing that I do with the camera is I change the focal length. The focal length is a slightly more complex formula, but it's based on the same thing. In this case, I'm taking the Z location of her left, right hand, left, right foot, and head and hip. And what I'm doing is I'm saying, okay, let's start with a focal length of 110 millimeters, and let's subtract out the difference, so the max minus the min of those things, and multiply that by 38 millimeters. And so what ends up happening, therefore, is that if she is compressed together, then we don't subtract out very much. In other words, we don't zoom out very much. But if she's far apart, like maybe her hands way up above her head and her feet way down below, then it will then that value is larger, and so we subtract more, and so we zoom out. That ends up being the effect there. And so if I go between here where she's standing up, you can see the focal length is 56 millimeters, and when I go forward into this pose where she's sitting down, the focal length is 86 millimeters. And so I'm zooming out, I'm zooming in. So that's just the more she's compressed together like that, the more she's zoomed in. And that is the full set of tricks to make that camera work. I'm about to go ahead and do this for the right and the left as well. The only difference there, of course, will be that instead of doing an X location, I'll be doing the same thing with a Y location on the left and right cameras. And then when I'm done with all that, I should end up with 4 different views that are all centered to, no matter what pose she's in, and no matter how far from the camera, excuse me, no matter how far from the origin, etc. So that's my goal. All right, thanks for watching, and if you're interested, this is my character, Princess Vera Shantess. I've got her on sale on Gumroad and ArtStation and Flipped Normals and other places, so feel free to go purchase her if you want to play around with this character for yourself. All right, again, thanks for watching.